All right, today we are talking about ancient Rome and we are talking about gladiators. And this is an article by Vicky Chow from medhelper.com. And it starts out like this. Back in the old days of Rome, people loved to see gladiator fights. Gladiators were professionally trained warriors, and their job was not to defend the nation, but instead it was to battle against each other in public. To the onlookers, such combats were fun and exciting, but to gladiators, they weren't. To them, such combats were excruciating matters. Every time they marched into the center of an arena for a match, they put their lives on the line. If they made one false move, they could easily get injured or worse, face the most horrible outcome of defeat, which was death. Interestingly, though, ancient Rome was famous for this brutal form of sport, but it didn't invent it. The credit should really go to the Etruscans. The Etruscans believed that when an important man died, his spirit needed a human sacrifice to survive the afterlife. To honor the deceased, they would stage a battle at the man's funeral. They'd have two gladiators fight until one killed the other. As the loser lay dying on the ground, his listless body became a burial offering. The Etruscans ruled Rome for about a century. While it is quite possible they first brought the custom to Rome during that period, there's no proof that the Romans actually practiced it at that time. Historical records show that the first gladiator fight in Rome occurred in 264 BC. It was long after the Etruscans were gone. That display was for honoring a man named Brutus. At his funeral, his sons held a contest among three pair of gladiators, so six people total. The fight must have gotten a lot of buzz around town, and slowly it took root in Rome and became a popular sport. With more and more people watching the game, the scale of it grew bigger over time. It went from the initial three pair to 300 and then 5,000. For the most part, gladiators were usually criminals, slaves, or prisoners of war. Held against their will, they were enrolled in schools called ludi. Once there, they were taught how to use weapons. They had to learn how to engage in fights. Upon graduation, they each would be assigned a specific class. The class would later dictate the type of weapon a gladiator could use. It would also dictate the type of gladiators he could fight. For example, in a gladiator game, the organizer would pit a fight between a netman and a pursuer. So the former, the netman, had a net in his right hand and a dagger in his left. The latter, the pursuer, came fully armed. As the two warriors faced each other in the arena, the netman would try his best to cast the net over the pursuer. If he managed to do that, he could then use the dagger to kill the opponent. Of course, death was the most common outcome of a gladiator fight, but it wasn't the only outcome. When a gladiator was wounded, he could raise a forefinger to beg for mercy from the audience or the high ranking officials at the game. If they wanted to spare his life, they could turn their thumbs up or wave their handkerchiefs. If they wanted to slay him, they could turn their thumbs down towards their chests. Usually, the audience's response was enough to determine the fate of the wounded gladiator, because whatever the crowd wanted, right? However, the final decision was always in the hands of the emperor if he was there, or the game organizers if he wasn't. There was a lot of pressure, a lot of excitement around it. Undoubtedly, a gladiator's life was a sad one. Each time he entered a game, he knew very well it could be his last. Each time he made the pledge, "We who die salute you," at the onset of a game, he knew he meant what he said. If a gladiator was lucky enough to win enough combats, he could receive a discharge from further service. A successful gladiator enjoyed fame and fortune, but his popularity would never erase his past. This was because the Romans had mixed feelings about their gladiators. On the one hand, they despised them for their shameful backgrounds, but on the other hand, they admired their strength. They saw them as professional athletes, right? The conflicting emotions were like a tug of war. While most people looked down on gladiators, they followed the sport wholeheartedly. They cheered on their favorite contestants whenever he was in a match. They showered him with praise. They even depicted him in poems and paintings. He could become a very famous gladiator. Gladiators fights fell into disfavor during the 4th century. They started to become less and less popular. Emperor Constantine I issued an edict, a ruling, in 325 AD and officially banned the sport. His order, however, wasn't taken seriously, and for the next several decades, the Romans continued to flock to arenas and watch gladiators dueling it out in public. They didn't give up the entertainment until Emperor Honorius came along. Emperor Honorius ascended the throne in 393 AD. Shortly after he gained control, he banned the sport again. This time he made sure the order was taken seriously. With determination, he was finally able to put an end to this violent pastime. The last known gladiator fight in Rome was on January 1st, 404 AD. After that, it faded into history and became a thing of the past. So from there, you're answering the questions by either making the correct answers bold, highlighting them, or underlining them, or all of the above, like I did. All right, thanks.